So I got a question from one of my most recent videos, and let me just read it here. Does soy affect estrogen production? How do we approach this? And then I also got a different question related to soy, but not quite the same, and more about how do we use different foods that have soy in it, specifically tofu. And that said, can you show different ways to incorporate tofu into my diet recipes? And then I've even gotten messages from people on Facebook and Instagram. One friend wrote to me, I know some women have concern regarding soy. Can you clear the air on estrogen in foods and such? Hashtag food science, hashtag doctor. So I think a lot of people send me this message because number one, I'm a doctor, I'm an internal medicine doctor and an obesity medicine doctor. So there is this expectation that I can explain, hey, what's the truth? And the other part of that is that I'm a chef, I'm a plant-based chef, so I tend to use a lot of soy products. And so it's almost like there's this tension between, hey, you use this for food, that's great, it's a good protein source, but is it really good for us from the medical side of things? So I want to talk about that. So when it comes to soy, the main reason why there's a huge question is that soy mimics estrogen in the body. So estrogen is a hormone. There's nothing wrong with estrogen in of itself when it's produced normally by the body. For women, that's what helps us as we develop. There were studies done and a lot of evidence that show, wait a minute, when you give someone estrogen outside their body, they have an increased risk for some concerning conditions. One being blood clots, specifically blood clots to the lungs. The other side of that, soy foods, or soybean, I should say, the soybean, this particular bean, I should say, produces a compound called isoflavone. That compound is called a phytoestrogen, which means it's a plant-like estrogen. So it looks very similar to the estrogen that's produced in our body. And so on one hand, that's great if you're going through menopause or you're in a situation where you need more estrogen, because that plant-like estrogen can act like estrogen in the body. However, the concern is, well, if estrogen can increase your risk for blood clots, there's even estrogen that can increase your risk for certain breast cancers that respond to too much estrogen, shouldn't we be avoiding soy? So I'm not the one who's discovered this. I would say Dr. Michael Greger, he's an amazing doctor. I've read his book, How Not to Die. Definitely recommend reading that. He talks about soy specifically, and he even has a video, which I'll link to that as well, and I'll make sure I put that down in the caption. But essentially, there's two different receptors that estrogen can bind to. There's the alpha receptors and the beta receptors. When we think of how estrogen works in the body, that's usually estrogen binding to the alpha receptors, right? But with soy, that looks so similar to estrogen, when it binds to the alpha receptors, it actually stops estrogen from getting there. And you could say, well, isn't that a bad thing? Well, it's actually a good thing in situations where it can increase your risk for breast cancer, or it can increase your risk for blood clots. The positive is that plant-like compound, that plant-like estrogen, will then bind to what we have found as beta receptors. And these receptors is actually associated with a decreased risk of osteoporosis and also a decreased risk of breast cancer. There have been studies where women who have breast cancer, when they eat more soy-based foods, they actually have less likely to have a recurrence of that breast cancer. And so does that mean then eat all the soy in the world, like there's no issues with it? No, I wouldn't say that either. It really depends on what type of soy you're eating. So there's really a range, right? So I think of it from super processed to more whole food. So the purest form is going to be the soybean, right? And so in America, I would say, at least for me, the easiest way to eat the soybean is edamame. Edamame is the young soybean, right? And so I love to eat this with my daughter. It's a super healthy snack. I'll put a little salt on it. For me, put it on top of my salad, or you can just eat it fresh. Then after the edamame, I started thinking about, okay, the actual soybean itself, you can have what's called tempeh. So that's a fermented soybean. So if you've ever seen tempeh, usually it's like a patty. It's like in a rectangular shape, at least the way that I've seen it. And you can actually see the individual beans. They are matted together and they've been fermented, which is really good for gut health. So that'd be kind of the next step. You also can use something like a miso paste. That is fermented soybean. I know a lot of people, they don't like tofu. I love tofu, and I'm going to share with you guys a recipe that I like a lot towards the end. Tofu, everybody, there's a lot of arguments with it, like, it's bland. I think of it like chicken, honestly. Like if you ate chicken and you didn't season it, it would be bland and you would not like it. Tofu, you have to season it. You have to cook it well. Like you have to know how to cook it well, I should say. Not cook it well, like cook it for a long time. And then, you know, it depends on how you pair it with other flavors, other spices, things like that. For a lot of inspiration, I use, I go to a lot of Asian recipes because that population tends to use a lot of tofu in very creative ways that are different than what we're used to in the States. So then after tofu, as you get to more processed, I would say soy milk, right? And that'd probably be the easiest way to kind of step into it. But we'll talk a little bit more about how you can step into eating more soy-based foods. And then lastly, for me, the most processed would be your plant-based meat alternatives. So a lot of these meats have soy in them. So one of my favorites is tofurkey. It has soy, also has chickpeas, if I'm not mistaken. I'll put it up here so you guys can see. And then you think about like your Impossible burgers, things like that. They have soy. Usually they say soy protein isolate. So that's a little different than soybeans. It's not actually just the bean itself. It's the soy isolated from that. And so that's kind of your range of whole food version of soy all the way to the most processed form. So when it comes to, all right, I'm interested in trying soy. Where should I start? I really put people in 3 categories. There's one, man, I'm super adventurous. I'm willing to go for this. Like, I'm excited. Show me some recipes. Then there's the person, sounds interesting. I'll give it a try. Just be careful. And there's the third person who's like, no way, I'm not trying it. Or I've tried it before. Tofu is nasty. Don't give it to me. So for that person, I would say don't go straight to tofu. Definitely don't go straight to tempeh. It has a very acquired taste. I would say stick more to your plant-based alternative meats. I don't think those meats or those plant-based alternatives to meat or mock meats are bad. I see them more as like a transition food for people who are trying to eat a little bit more plant-based, and for people who are trying to decrease the amount of meat they consume. However, just keep in mind that it's soy protein isolate in most of the ingredients in those meats. There are other options that have more soybeans itself, so you can look into that. Just make sure you look at the back of the ingredients. Another option, soy milk. Maybe you could just take that step up. Instead of using dairy milk, I'm gonna use soy milk. You're adding protein to it. I like to use soy milk when I make my oatmeal. I like to use soy milk when I make my smoothies. It's like my favorite way to make my smoothies. It makes it really creamy, adds a lot of protein. It's a very easy lift. It doesn't taste any different to me because I'm not drinking it straight, so that could be an easy step for you. And even edamame, you might like that. I mean, it's a really nice snack, super light. I think that'll kind of help you see, oh, okay, soy doesn't have to just be tofu. Now for the person who's in the middle is like, this is interesting. I may be willing to try. Don't go too fast. I don't want it to taste crazy. I would suggest like trying miso, because miso paste, right, is that soybean paste. And so I love to use this when I'm making my broths. I usually get it from the Asian farmers market. And so like just the other day, I used it as the base for my grits. You are usually, for me, like if I'm doing like a shrimp and grits kind of thing, where in this case I used hemp hearts as the fish part of the fish and grits, and I used the miso as like the base for my broth to give a lot of flavor to the grits as I was cooking them. You can even do like a miso based soup. That was like one of my favorite things to eat when I'm at hibachi restaurants, is that miso soup. It adds a lot of flavor. It's super simple. And it can kind of give you that baby step into it. Another way to use it, actually I'm going to do it today for lunch when I make my salad, which I'll show you, is a miso based dressing. And so for me, I love creamy dressing, so I like to use cashews. So in this particular recipe, I'm going to use the cashews, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend them up. I let them soak in some water for a couple of hours, actually overnight I let them soak. I'm going to blend them up in a smoothie, add the miso paste, add a little bit of oil, thin it out with water, add some garlic, and then a little bit of nutritional yeast to give it a little bit of that like cheesy component to it. And then I just pour that over my salad. It adds a nice creamy component, and the miso adds a really great flavor. And you can sweeten that if you like with maple syrup, honey if you're not all the way plant-based or not vegan, or even like a squeeze of orange juice or the zest of an orange. Ooh, that's really good. And that brings me to the last category. Someone who's like me, you know, maybe you've already made those baby steps to soy-based products and you're like, I'm ready to try tofu. I'm ready to try tempeh. Like, I'm all in. Let's go for it. This tofu recipe I'm going to show you is what I would say, go for that. It's one of my favorites. To me, it's the easiest way to deal with tofu. For me, I like to get extra firm tofu. I chop that up in cubes. I season it the way I like. I add my oil, I add my garlic powder, of course, onion powder, salt, a little bit of paprika. I put a smidge of cornstarch just so it can crisp up in the oven, and I put it on a sheet pan because for me, with my family, it's a lot easier to do it that way instead of being over the stove, but you do what works for you. When I put it in the oven for about 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes, 420 degrees Fahrenheit, and it comes out super crispy, and then I just toss it in whatever sauce I'm feeling. And for this recipe, it's like a ginger-based sesame sauce with orange. Oh my gosh, the zest of an orange, the squeeze of the juice. I think I put there's some garlic in there chopped up. Man, did I have scallions? I don't remember if I had scallions. There might be scallions in there. You'll see the recipe. So you got this, try it. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments which one of these are you gonna try. Actually, let me know in the comments which person are you. Are you the adventurous person? Are you like, I'll give it a baby step? Or are you the person who's like, there's no way I'm trying this, but maybe one of the suggestions you gave me, I'll try.